All right, so welcome everyone to class 65 on Bible prophecy about Israel, and we are in the most incredible final book of the Bible called the Book of Revelation of Jesus Christ, our Lord. So we're going to do a review of last week's material, and so we're going to quickly review or do a brief study of God's sovereignty. So, Monica, can you please read question A in English?
Okay. The phrase God is in control is popular, especially in Catholic countries. In what ways is this phrase true or not true?
Okay, very good. And so actually Catholic, so remember in English, you want the emphasis up front. So you gave it a little bit of a Portuguese pronunciation. So Catholic countries.
Okay.
Very good. So what do you think? The phrase God is in control is popular, especially in Catholic countries. In what ways is this phrase true or not true?
It is true because God is sovereign, but his will is that it's not always happens.
Absolutely right. Okay, so it's mostly true, let's say, but there's also part of it that's not true. So let's go into some details because it's kind of important. So Emily, can you please read question B in English?
Was God in control responsible during the fall when Hitler killed 6 million Jews?
Okay, so what do you think?
He's good.
Go ahead, Julia. Good for you. Go ahead and answer.
He's good. You are done.
Okay, we're going to get to that question in just a second. So thank you, but we're going to answer question B first, and then we'll have you read question C, okay? So thank you. So I think Emily, you were perhaps going to answer with, or who else? Maybe Monica?
I was going to say that God was reigning and was in control in some sense, but not that his will was being done.
Okay.
That was not.
Okay, very good. So I think as we spoke last week, it's God is ultimately in control, right? Because it's his world it's his universe, it's his creation, but he doesn't control necessarily every event, because to control every event means you're responsible. Okay, he could stop. He could have stopped the fall, but he didn't. So he didn't control the fall in that sense. When Hitler killed 6 million Jews, that God's not responsible. Okay, so it's kind of a question of what do we mean by control? And what this is getting at is perhaps that God is not responsible for all evil. If you consider God's sovereignty as total, and then you have to say, yeah, he's also the source of evil. It's not just that he allowed it, but he's in control. He made it happen. So let's go. So Julia, now can you please read question C for us in English? Question C.
Is good is ours done.
Okay, is God's will always done? Very good. Is God's will always done? All right, so what do you think? What do you remember from last class?
Ours done.
Very good. Yeah. So is it always done? Maybe not. We just gave examples when his will was not done. And we also know from the Our Father, or as it's called Lord's Prayer in English, it says, and it's Lucas 11:2, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. meaning obviously his will is not being done on earth right now. Right? Otherwise that verse makes no sense. So his will is not being done. He doesn't control everything. He's not responsible for everything. And we're going to see why. So in question D, Monica, can you please read question D in English?
Why is that not the case?
Okay, so why is God's will not being done? You remember? See, in this week, I didn't forget to remove the answers. So, okay.
Now it's
So,
starting.
yeah, now you got to. Okay, so what do you think? You remember? So why is God's will not being done? It's because of sin. And how did sin occur? Free will.
Adam, give the title deed to the mold.
Okay, so let's go. Emily, can you read question E in English, please?
Why is it critical that free will be free?
Okay, so what do you think? So why is free will so important? Why did God bother? So Julia, you might want to put yourself on mute.
Two did Adam. Teacher that's to order.
Very nice. Hold on 1 second. We'll get to question F in just a second. Mas, Júlia, quando tem gente, pode colocar pode mutar, porque para a gente não ouve muito coisa da sua casa, tá? Mas,
Okay.
momentinho, porque a gente vai responder na pergunta E primeiro. So why is it critical that free will be free?
Because it's God's love.
Say it, yes, it's because love, because God wanted, thank you, Julia. So God wanted us to love him, and true love necessitates free will. All right, so we have to be able to choose between loving and not loving, and free will gives us that choice. So, and that's where sin comes in, and that's why God doesn't control us when we have the free will and we sin.
Okay.
He's not controlling us. He's not responsible for that. Okay.
Ben,
Yes.
did evil start when Satan in Satan's fall?
Did Eve do what? Sorry.
Did evil start in Satan's fall?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Right, because that was the first rebellion. So in that sense, that was the first sin.
Okay.
Okay, so the Bible doesn't tell us when the serpent, the devil, Satan, or Lucifer originally, when he fell. But it obviously was before the Garden of Eden, or he would not be trying to tempt Eve. Okay, so we can surmise, we can conclude that when Lucifer fell and became what we know now is Satan or the devil, that was in a sense, the first fall. It wasn't the fall of man, it was the fall of an angel. And that was the first sin that we know of.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so Julia, so you can take yourself off of mute and say question F for us. So question F in English, that starts with to whom did Adam? So you have to unmute there you go. Go ahead, Julia. Question F, that starts with to whom did Adam?
To whom did Adam Give teacher that to order.
Okay, so give, so the G is hard, so it's give the title deed to the world. So very good. That's a long sentence. Okay, so what do we think, gang? So to whom did Adam give the title deed to the world?
Satan.
Yep. And remember when we studied Revelation chapter 5, that John wept because the book could not be unsealed. And we view that book as being, or scroll, as being the title deed. And so that he was weeping that that title deed could not be taken back. But he soon learned there was one person who could open the scroll, and that was Jesus Christ. Okay, so Monica, can you please read question G in English?
Who then is the God of this world?
Okay, so I think we might know that, but let's go ahead. Emily, can you please read 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4? 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4.
In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them.
Okay, so we repeat every verse in Portuguese to make sure that no misunderstanding occurs with God's word. So if I may, nos quais o Deus deste século cegou os entendimentos dos incrédulos, para que lhe não resplandeça a luz do evangelho da glória de Cristo, que é a imagem de Deus. Okay, so and the answer to question D? Okay, is Satan. Yep, so it's pretty clear that is Paul, Apostle Paul, in the second letter to Corinthians, is talking about the God of the world is Satan, who has blinded the minds of them which believe not. Okay, so that's bad news. We have a God of this world, and that God of this world is not Father, the God. It's not Jesus Christ. It's Satan. Julia, can you unmute yourself and read question H, please, in English? Question H, why is the phrase?
Why is the phrase good is control, especially dangerous for Catholics to say believe it is?
Okay, very good. You said with very good confidence. Now, to pronounce in English new words, you want to slow down some and make sure you pronounce every vowel, every consonant. So first of all, why is the phrase, I think you said good, but it's God. Why is the phrase God is in control, especially dangerous for Catholics to say believe this? Okay, but very good. I love your confidence. So what do you think? Why is the phrase God is in control especially dangerous for Catholics?
Because they, go ahead, Julia.
Say it again,
No.
Emily.
Because it removes the responsibility of them.
You're absolutely right. Okay, so if you go around saying, oh, God's in control, that's kind of like, there's nothing more I need to do, right? He's in control. And specifically, you're attending Catholic Church, you say God's in control and I'm good. No. Okay, so because for a Catholic to believe God is in control of everything means that they are likely on their way to hell. So they're risking damnation, and it's fatalistic to say God's in control. Like it's like, yeah, it's out of my control. If I keep on doing what I've always done with the Catholic Church and what my father and grandfather and everyone did, things will be fine. Because God's in control. Okay, that's an excuse. It's like a fatalistic belief that can get one in big trouble. Okay, so let's move on. So Monica, can you read question I in English?
In what ways in this phrase true in the life of a born-again believer?
Well, I'm sorry, I wrote something. In what ways is this phrase true in the life of a born-again believer? Okay, so I forgot to give us this ray of hope last time by saying, no, you know, God's not really in control. That's dangerous to say that because it allows lazy people to continue to be lazy. Okay, so maybe for the born-again Christian, maybe God is in control is true. And so let's see how. So Emily, can you say Romans 8:28 in English? Romans chapter 8, verse 28.
Yes. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose.
Okay, I think that's a very well-known verse, right? It's just beautiful and such wonderful assurance. And so in Portuguese, it goes like this. E sabemos que todas as coisas que contribuem juntamente para o bem daqueles que amam a Deus, daqueles que são chamados segundo o seu propósito. Okay, so that makes it sound to me that whatever happens to a born-again Christian, it all works for the good. Okay, and that can mean our suffering, our pain, our injury, our persecution, even our death. God will use all of that for the good. Our good, the general good, okay? And so what this implies to me is that God, with born-again believers, God is definitely in control, particularly of major events. Okay, so yes, he's in control about when I die. Now, obviously, if I make a big mistake, you know, and I don't know, I make a stupid mistake, well, he can choose to save me, but he's going to decide if he's going to let me go now. And he's going to use my death for the good. I don't know how, but it's up to him. Okay, and other major events. So, because it says here, all things work together for good to them that love God. That sounds pretty clear. We may not enjoy all of it, suffering, pain, loss, persecution, but all of it will work to the good. And that implies that God is, he's the one who for all born again believers, who's like managing all of the details. Now, obviously, when we sin, there's consequences to that. So in that sense, so God allows us to sin, but it's our free will that makes us sin. Okay, but in our case, he really has to allow us. All right, so anyway, so that there's a note of hope. So yes, for born again Christians, God is in control, particularly for big events. Okay, you know, small things when we make stupid mistakes, he's going to let that happen, and we have to pay the consequences. Okay, so let's continue our review now and study of the marriage supper of the Lamb, which is one of the most beautiful events to look forward to. This is just beautiful. This is what every Christian should be dreaming of and thinking of as being, oh my goodness, maybe not too far in the future, this will be me here experiencing. Okay, so Julia, can you please read Revelation chapter 19, verse 7 in English? So it starts with "Let us be glad." And so say it in English, please, nice and slow, because then you can pronounce each word. So you have to unmute yourself first, Julia. Did we lose Julia? You have to unmute yourself, Julia. Maybe. Okay, go ahead. So go ahead.
Why is the wave?
Okay, that's the next question. Can you read the verse above that? Revelation chapter 19, verse 7. It starts with "Let us be glad," and say it nice and slowly. So you can unmute yourself and then say, "Let us be glad and rejoice." Go ahead. Okay, we'll let you do the next line. So Emily, can you do Revelation 19, verse 7? It's a big verse.
Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready.
All right. That's wonderful. What great news this is. Let's see, I'm just going to pop over to Revelation 19:7. Regozijemo-nos e alegremo-nos e demos-lhe glória, porque vindas são as bodas do Cordeiro, e já a sua esposa se aprontou. Glory be to God. So now, Julia, can you please read question J that starts with who? So question J in English, please. You have to unmute yourself.
Who is the wife?
Okay, who is the wife? Okay, very good. Who is the wife? All right, so what do we think? Who's the wife that's mentioned here?
The church.
Absolutely right, Monica. Interestingly, the word church is not used again in the rest of the Bible. Okay, so now the word church, which we saw again back in chapter 2 and 3, because they were all about the letters to the churches. I think we might have seen the word church still in chapter 4, and it disappeared. Okay, and so the church is now gone, no longer exists, because it is now the wife, and that is at the marriage supper of the Lamb. So Monica, can you please read Revelation 19:8 in English?
And to her was granted that they should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of saints.
Very good. I think in the top line you said that she should be arrayed in fine linen. Fine linen. And the linen is irregular, because there's only one N, and so how you said it at first would be, right, according to the rule, it should be linen, but it isn't. Right? It's pronounced like there's two N's, so it's linen. So very good. You corrected yourself the second time you pronounced the word and got it right. Thank you. So Revelation 19:8, e foi-lhe dado que se vestisse de linho fino, puro e resplandecente, porque o linho fino são as justiças dos santos. Oh, wow. This is great. Okay. So let's go to Emily. Can you read? Actually, I'm going to have you. Yeah. I'll say, can you read question K, please, Emily, in English?
What image of the wife does Paul give us?
Okay, and it's actually in the next verse. So Emily, go ahead and read 2 Corinthians 11:2 in English, please. 11:2.
For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ.
Okay, there's some more good news. So that in Portuguese goes, conheço, let's see, that's 11:2. Porque estou zeloso de vós como o zelo de Deus, porque vos tenho preparado para vos apresentar como uma virgem pura a marido, a saber, a Cristo. Okay, so to answer question K, what image of the wife does Paul give us? What does he say in 2 Corinthians 11:2?
A pure and glorified wife.
Yep. And he says the word he uses here is a chaste virgin. So that is so somehow, and you're absolutely right, we've been purified because we're certainly not a chaste virgin here on earth. And when we are raptured and go up to heaven, we receive glorified bodies, and we become miraculously chaste virgins in the eyes of Christ and God. So,
What is chaste? Yeah. What is chaste?
Okay, good question. So chaste is like a synonym for pure.
Okay.
Okay, so chaste can also be kind of like clean, pure, but good question. Okay, so Julia, can you read question L? Question L in English that starts with how is the wife? Question L.
Warriors wife made triste.
Okay, so how is the wife made chaste? All right, so that they're all, but go ahead, repeat that.
How wife made triste.
Okay, made chaste. Very good. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the answer to that. So Monica, can you read Ephesians 5:25, please, through 27? Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 to 27.
Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present into himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish.
Very good. Those are some long sentences, and that the idea of wrinkle, you don't want to pronounce the E. It's like wrinkle. All right, so I think you said a little more wrinkly. But very good. So let me see. I think I have this in Portuguese. So Ephesians 5:25. Ok, vós maridos, amai vossas mulheres, como também Cristo amou a igreja, e a si mesmo se entregou por ela, para a santificar, purificando-a como a lavagem da água pela palavra, Okay, so what's the answer to this? How is the wife made chaste? What does Paul tell us in Ephesians, the letter to the Ephesians? Well, he said, yes, exactly. So Christ also loved the church, the future wife, and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word. Okay, so it sounds like it's really the word here that makes the wife us chaste. We also know Jesus's blood helps, but here it says it's the word, which is wonderful. Emily, can you please say or read question M in English?
What, in contrast, purifies Israel?
Okay, so what do you think? Did the word purify Israel?
No.
No. So what does it take to purify Israel?
Tribulation.
Yep. Okay, so they actually have to go through the tribulation period, unfortunately, before they actually recognize Jesus as the Messiah and their Savior. And this brings up an interesting dichotomy, and maybe we'll discuss this further. But what this is implying is that there's a heavenly wife, the church, and there's an earthly wife, Israel. And that our positions are a little bit different. All right, eventually we're all the wife, but the roles might be a little bit different because we arrived at wifedom differently. But we're focusing more on the heavenly wife or the church right now, because that's what this chapter is talking about. So Julia, can you please read question 1? So now we're moving into new material, and so we change from letters to numbers. So question 1 that starts with when and where.
Where and when its marriage supper of lamb occurring.
Very good. Occurring. So and remember, you can take it slowly. So, but still, you a lot of confidence, and you said that well. So the marriage supper of the Lamb occurring. So what do we think? So let's back out a little bit. Where is this happening? Where is this marriage supper? And when is it occurring? What do we think?
In heaven.
Yep. Okay. So that's the where. And how about when?
I'm not sure.
Okay. During the millennium? No.
After.
Well, no, the millennium is that 1,000-year period, and that's coming up in a future chapter in Revelation. So this is earlier, but is it before the rapture? If it's up in heaven, then where are we? Then where are we in time? We're in heaven when? During the entire tribulation period.
Okay.
Right? So we're on earth, the rapture occurs, up we go to heaven, and then we're in heaven for those 7 years, and what do? We come back with Jesus for the second coming. Okay, so then we're back. So those 7 years, we're in heaven, and that's where that we believe this marriage is occurring. So in other words, if we're up in heaven and it's during the tribulation, likely the second half of the tribulation called the Great Tribulation, it means that this is just the church who are getting married. Israel isn't getting married, right? They haven't repented yet. Okay, so it's the church getting married to Christ in heaven. So Monica, can you please read question 2 in English?
So is Israel part of the bride marrying the bridegroom?
Okay, well, we kind of answered that. So one thing, it's a little bit marrying. So it's hard because it's like two vowel sounds right next to each other. So it's like marrying. It's hard to say. Okay, but very good. So is Israel part of the bride? Nope. And that's why I asked, where are we and what time are we? Okay, because Israel is has not yet been purified. They have to go through the entire tribulation period. Okay, so let's go to, so Emily, can you read Revelation 19, verse 9, please? So chapter 19, verse 9.
And he said unto me, Write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said unto me, These are the true sayings of God.
Okay, so this is so beautiful. So, so as John is reporting, he is told to write. Okay, so write down what you are seeing and being told. And blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. So let me see. Here it is in Portuguese. E disse-me, escreve, bem-aventurados aqueles que são chamados à ceia das bodas do Cordeiro. E disse-me, estas são as verdadeiras palavras de Deus. Okay, so that's, you can be sure that when John is told, these are the true sayings of God, these words have very strong and special importance. And so, Julia, can you please read question 3 in English? Question 3 that starts with who is called?
Who is called to marriage supper of the Lamb?
All right, very good until that last word. So, and that's supper of the Lamb, okay, of the Lamb, which as we, exactly, and we just read it is in Portuguese, that is Cordeiro. So who is called to the marriage supper of the Lamb? Who do you? So when you're saying they're called to the marriage supper, who's getting married? Who's getting married to the Lamb?
Those who were redeemed.
Yeah, and so that's who? The church. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's us. But then let's look at this, because remember the Bible is very sparse in words. It doesn't do a lot of pretty description. It doesn't say, oh, it was a beautiful day and Jesus had like a little drop of dew on his brow. It doesn't do a kind of novelist kind of filler to give you like a beautiful picture. No, it just tells you the facts. It goes boom, boom, boom. And so let's try to understand this marriage supper a little bit better. And how are we going to do that? Let's look elsewhere in the Bible. So Monica, can you please read question 4 in English?
Is there a parable related by Jesus that amplifies the theme?
A theme, very good. Okay, so I think it's already in the next verse, but who remembers, what's this parable called? Does anyone remember? Well, let's read the parable. Or part of it at least. So Emily, can you please read Matthew chapter 22, verses 2 to 3. Matthew chapter 22, verses 2 to 3.
The kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come.
Wow, how sad. Okay, let me try that. O reino dos céus é semelhante a certo rei que celebrou as bodas do seu filho, e enviou enviou os seus servos a chamar os convidados para as bodas, e estes não quiseram vir. Okay, so does anyone remember what the name of this parable is? Well, it's called the marriage feast. Okay, and that's kind of what we're talking about in the marriage supper of the Lamb here in Revelation chapter 19. Okay, so let's go further into this parable. So we just read that the kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king. So it's making a metaphor, a parable, saying the kingdom of heaven. So the real kingdom is kind of like one of a certain king, and he made a marriage for his son. And who do you think that son is? Who's the king?
The king is God the Father, and
Yeah,
the Son is Jesus.
exactly right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. So let's then take a look at question 5. So Julia, can you please say question 5 for us in English? That starts in the parable.
When the parable one might see service represents.
Okay, very good. Now there's when it's WH, so it's that fourth word, it's who. It's a very different kind of pronunciation than in Portuguese. So in the parable, who might the servants represent? Okay, so this is all right. So it's kind of obvious that the father is God the Father and the son who's getting married. But who are the servants? So the servants are sent out by the king to do what? To evangelize? Okay, so because when we go out to evangelize, we're saying, hey, come marry Jesus. Okay, we're switching things over. It's like, okay, the servants, we are servants of God the Father. And in this parable, he just sent us out. But what happens? And so, Monica, can you read Matthew 22:4? Okay, but wait, I'm sorry. What we already know what happens is that he sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come. Okay, and so that's kind of strange. So it's like, so God the Father has bidden, he's like asked people to come to the wedding and they would not come. So can God the Father ask someone to do something and they refuse if God's in control? No. He's asking. He wants us all. Remember, he doesn't want any lost. He wants none of the world to go to hell, to go to eternal damnation. He wants all of us to accept his invitation, and they would not come. Okay, so then now what happens next? So Monica, can you read Matthew chapter 22, verse 4?
Okay. Again, he sent for other servants, saying, tell them which are bidden.
Bidden, you're right, 2 D's.
Bidden.
We don't want any, like, Joe Biden in the Bible.
Sorry. Behold, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come unto the marriage.
Very good. And so again, he sent forth other servants and saying, tell them which are bidden. Okay, and bidden is like to buy. To bid is a synonym with to ask. But here I'll give the Portuguese so it will clarify, hopefully. Depois enviou outros servos, dizendo, Dizei aos convidados, eis que tenho a meu jantar preparado, os meus bois e cevados já mortos, e tudo já pronto, vinde às bodas. Okay, so this is strange. This is because God does a second invitation. So that he invited the first time, he sent the church out, the servants, and people refused. And now he sends other servants. So it's not the church any longer, all right? Other servants. Tell them which are bidden, behold, I prepared my dinner, etc. Okay, so let's think together. So Emily, can you read question 6, please?
Who might be these other servants?
Okay, so it's speculation, not, because as we see, the parables are not easy to understand. They shed some light on various mysteries, but they are intentionally parables. And parables in some way are like riddles, and I'll write out riddles. Okay, so in that, remember, parables are not supposed to be understood by unsaved people. So unsaved people, they look at the Bible, they read the parable, and they go, okay, so it's only for saved people to come close to understanding, but sometimes it's not, very clear. So let's just say, all right, but so let's think together. All right, because remember Isaiah 1:18, one of my favorite verses. Let us reason together, saith the Lord. God wants each of us individually to reason directly with him. What an offer. The creator, the God of the universe wants you and I to reason directly with him. Wow. Okay, so who might these other servants represent? Well, this is tough. So the interpretation that I've read that makes a little more sense, but we'll only know for sure in heaven, is that this is during the tribulation. And these are tribulation saints. Because remember, the first invitation the church makes, and many people say, forget about it. They turn down the invitation. Now there's other sorts. So God says, all right, that didn't work. Boom. He takes those servants home. Okay, so we go home and we're no longer available to give any more invitations, right? If the church was still around, you don't choose other servants. If the main servants are the church, why would you choose other servants? Because the church is no longer on earth. Okay, so it makes a little bit of sense. All right, so it's during the tribulation, and then these are tribulation saints, people who come to Christ during the tribulation. So Emily, if you can continue with Matthew 22:6. So Matthew chapter 22, verse 6 in English.
And the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them.
Wow. E os outros, apoderando-se dos servos, os ultrajaram e mataram. Ouch. Now, that kind of is, when do God's servants get killed or slain? The past tense of to slay is slew. So when do God's servants get killed? During the tribulation. Okay? Because it's like if you don't take the mark of the beast, right, then you are executed. You profess, you don't worship the Antichrist, and instead you confess that you are only a follower of Jesus Christ. You are killed. So this is now supporting the theory that these other servants are maybe the tribulation saints. So, and just to continue this parallel, and we'll come back to this. So Julia, can you please read question 7 in English that starts with the remnant? Question 7 in English, the remnant.
The remnant was for what people?
Okay, so the remnant reminds us of what people? Okay, so now we're talking about word association. So we don't see the word remnant a lot in the Bible. When it does mention remnant, who most often does it refer to?
The remnant of Israel.
Absolutely right. So remember, there's no coincidences in the Bible. Okay, so God chooses each word. And so maybe here we are in the parable of the marriage feast. Jesus is telling the story. And so it's saying the remnant on earth took these servants, the tribulation saints, treated them spitefully and slew them. Wow. Okay, so it's kind of like, well, who's left of Israel are not all of them, but they're helping the Antichrist apparently, and they are slaying the tribulation saints. Okay, so that's just kind of like another thing. Well, maybe this is helping explain. So that is and we'll get a little bit further into what we're learning here, perhaps about the marriage supper based on the marriage feast parable when we come back to it next week. But are there any questions or comments about today's class?
I have a question about the parables. I remember that verse that talks about, I don't remember if it was Jesus that said that he talked through parables so that they don't understand it. So do you think that this verse has to do with both free will and God's sovereignty? Because when I first read it, I thought about only God's sovereignty, but maybe God knew that they wouldn't accept him. Do you think that?
Sorry, but which verse? So when you say this verse, you're talking about Matthew 22:6, or the verse that says how the parables are not understood by the unsaved?
Yes, I think it is a verse. I think it's in Matthew that talks about this when Jesus said that he talks in parables so that they cannot understand it.
Okay, and so your question about that verse is you're saying, is that verse telling us something about God's sovereignty? So continue your question, please, just so I can understand.
It's the first time that I read it, I thought about only God's sovereignty. But do you think that that man's free will also plays a role? Because I saw this verse as a justification for extreme Calvinists that use it to say like, no, God is sovereign in regards to that he controls who goes to hell. That free will doesn't play a part. They use this verse to justify it. But do you think that, for example, that the free will of God is already the free will of man, God is taking into consideration? I'm not sure if I'm clear enough.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and I just found the verse. It's actually John 10:6. Okay. And actually it's not Jesus saying directly, but John saying, this parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were, which he spake unto them. Well, maybe there's another one. So that's just one. I speak in parables, so they will not understand. Okay, no, you're right. So it's Matthew 13:34. I'll read it for us right now. Matthew 13:34. All all these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable he spake not unto them. But it's still not telling us that he says that they were not to understand that. But anyway, so there's a number of verses then that are implying and stating that Jesus speaks intentionally in parables. And so if I understand your question, about God's sovereignty versus free will, in this sense, it's a little more like God's sovereignty, because he's saying, I'm going to speak in a spiritual level, and if you are spiritually dead, you will not understand it. Okay, so a parable then is a spiritual parable. It's a spiritual lesson, and unsaved people by definition are still dead spiritually, and so they can't. So that gets more to God's sovereignty, because then, well, you would say, well, but where's the free will? Well, there is the free will, but the free will has to come in. They have to be saved first. They have to give their life to Jesus, be spiritually reborn, as Jesus tells Nicodemus in John chapter 3:3, you have to be reborn, and then you can understand the parables better. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think you're on the right track. That why would Jesus do that? Why would he speak in parables to the multitudes? So they could not understand. It's kind of like, well, it's that he knew they could not understand spiritual things, and so he was not going to, what's that verse? He was not going to throw pearls before swine or before pigs. Okay, so he's not going to tell them directly, because that's like throwing pearls before swine. With the apostles, he spoke more directly, because they are spiritually alive. Okay, so maybe it's a little more like that it's a waste of time to be too clear to poor unsaved people. So they're like, what did you say? Okay, it's kind of mean, but because I believe that the word of God is convicts souls. There's a special action by reading the word of God that helps break people's pride, helps break their blindness, and so that the word plays a part in helping reborn unsaved people. Okay, or it gives them the desire to be reborn. So, but it's a complicated question. All right, does that answer your question a little bit, Emily?
Yes, thank you. I was so confused in saying it.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? So I'm just gonna